History is littered with places that refuse to give up their secrets. Ancient monuments that defy explanation, ruins that shouldn't exist, structures built with precision we can barely replicate today. And despite decades, sometimes centuries of study, we still don't have all the answers. Today we're diving into some of the world's most mysterious historical places, and we'll explore what we know, what we think we know, and what remains frustratingly out of reach. So let's get into it. In the windswept deserts of southern Peru, etched into the arid plateau between the towns of Nazca and Palpa, lies one of archaeology's most baffling mysteries, the Nazca Lines. We're talking about hundreds of geometric shapes, animal figures, and straight lines carved into the earth, some stretching for miles. There's a spider, a hummingbird, a monkey, a condor, all massive, all precise, and all utterly invisible unless you're looking down from the air. Which raises the obvious question, why would ancient people, who had no way of flying, create enormous artworks they could never actually see? The lines were made by the Nazca culture between roughly 500 BCE and 500 CE. The method is straightforward enough. They removed the reddish pebbles covering the desert floor to reveal the lighter soil beneath. The desert's lack of rain and wind preserved them beautifully for over 2,000 years. But knowing how they were made doesn't explain why. Were they religious pathways? Astronomical calendars? Messages to the gods? Or something else entirely? One of the earliest theories, proposed by a Swiss author named Erich von Däniken, suggested they were landing strips for alien spacecraft. Because, of course, why wouldn't ancient people, with chisels and determination, need help from extraterrestrials? It's nonsense, obviously, but it caught the public imagination and still gets trotted out in conspiracy circles today. The more serious theories are far more interesting. German mathematician Maria Reich spent decades studying the lines and believed they were an astronomical calendar, with certain figures aligning to solstices and star patterns. Others think they were processional pathways used in water rituals, which makes sense in a desert where water meant survival. Recent research suggests the lines may have served multiple purposes. Some could have been pilgrimage routes. Others might have been offerings to mountain and sky deities, visible to gods if not to humans. The sheer scale suggests communal effort, hundreds of people working together over generations. That kind of dedication doesn't come from boredom. It comes from belief, from necessity, from something that mattered deeply to the culture that created them. What's remarkable is how well they've survived. The Nazca Desert is one of the driest places on Earth, with almost no rainfall and minimal wind erosion. That's kept the lines intact when they would have vanished almost anywhere else. But modern threats are closing in. Encroaching development, illegal mining, and even tire tracks from careless tourists have damaged sections of the site. UNESCO designated it a World Heritage Site in 1994, but protection only goes so far when you're trying to preserve something covering nearly 300 square miles.
John White left the colony in late 1587, planning to return quickly with supplies. But his timing could not have been worse. England was on the brink of war with Spain, and all ships were commandeered for the defense against the Spanish Armada. White was forced to wait, watching helplessly as months turned into years. He finally returned in August 1590, his ship approaching Roanoke under a darkening sky. When White and his crew landed, they found the settlement abandoned. Houses had been dismantled, suggesting an orderly departure rather than sudden panic. There were no signs of struggle, no bodies, no graves. The protective palisade had been partially torn down, and carved into a post was that haunting word, Croatoan. White had previously instructed the colonists to carve a Maltese cross if they left under duress, but no such symbol appeared. This suggested the colonists had departed peacefully, perhaps relocating to Croatoan Island, home to the friendly Croatoan tribe with whom the English had maintained good relations. White desperately wanted to search Croatoan Island, but a violent storm forced his ship to abandon the mission. He never returned to America, and the lost colonists were never found. What happened to them? Theories have multiplied over the centuries, each more intriguing than the last. The most straightforward explanation is that the colonists integrated with local Native American tribes. The Croatoan people later became known as the Lumbee tribe, and some Lumbee families have maintained oral traditions claiming English ancestry. In the 18th century, explorers reported meeting Native Americans with gray eyes and European features in the region. Could these have been descendants of the lost colonists? Archaeological evidence has offered tantalizing hints. In recent years, excavations have uncovered artifacts at sites inland from Roanoke, suggesting the colonists may have split into smaller groups and dispersed across the region. Some may have traveled to Croatoan Island, others to the Chesapeake Bay area. But without definitive proof, the mystery remains open. Darker theories suggest catastrophe struck the colony. Disease could have swept through, killing everyone before they could seek help. But this fails to explain the orderly dismantling of the settlement or the absence of graves. Conflicts with hostile tribes might have led to massacre, but again, no evidence of violence has ever been found. Some have proposed that a hurricane or drought forced the colonists to abandon Roanoke only to perish during their journey to safety. Another compelling theory involves Spanish interference. Spain considered the entire Americas its territory and had already attacked an earlier English settlement. Documents discovered in Spanish archives suggest Spanish forces may have captured and executed some Roanoke colonists, though this remains unproven. The mystery deepens when we consider the complete absence of written records left by the colonists. Not a single letter, journal entry, or note has ever been found explaining their fate. In an era when educated people documented their lives extensively, this silence is deafening. Did the colonists deliberately destroy their records, or were they lost to time, rotting in the humid coastal environment?
Today, many of the moai have been re-erected, standing once again as they did centuries ago. Rapa Nui is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and efforts to preserve and protect the statues continue. But the mystery remains. Not just how they were moved, but what drove an isolated island culture to pour so much effort, so much belief into creating these silent giants. They weren't practical. They didn't feed anyone. They didn't defend against invaders. But they mattered. And that tells us something profound about what it means to be human. In the heart of England, on the Salisbury Plain, stands a circle of massive stones that's been puzzling people for millennia. Stonehenge. It's one of the most famous prehistoric monuments in the world, and also one of the most misunderstood. Everyone's heard of it. Most people have seen pictures, but very few actually know what it was for. And here's the thing. Neither do the experts. Not completely, anyway. Stonehenge wasn't built in one go. It evolved over about 1,500 years, starting around 3000 BCE. The earliest phase was a simple circular ditch and bank, nothing particularly impressive. Then came wooden posts, which have long since rotted away. The iconic stone circle we know today was erected around 2500 BCE, during the late Neolithic period. The stones are divided into two types. The massive sarsen stones, some weighing 25 tons, came from Marlborough Downs, about 20 miles north. The smaller blue stones, weighing up to 4 tons each, were transported from the Preseli Hills in Wales. That's nearly 150 miles away. Without wheels, without machinery, just ropes, timber, and sheer bloody-minded determination. Why go to such extraordinary lengths? The effort involved is almost incomprehensible. Dragging those stones across rivers, up hills, through forests, it would have taken months, maybe years. And that's just to get them to the site. Then they had to be shaped, positioned, and fitted with mortise and tenon joints, a level of craftsmanship that speaks to planning and skill far beyond what we used to give Neolithic people credit for. So what was Stonehenge for? The most enduring theory is that it was an astronomical observatory. The alignment of the stones matches key solar and lunar events. On the summer solstice, the sun rises directly over the heel stone, sending a beam of light into the center of the circle.
On the winter solstice, the sunset aligns with the main axis. These alignments are too precise to be accidental. The builders clearly understood the movements of the sun and moon, and they encoded that knowledge into the monument's design. But it wasn't just a calendar. Recent excavations have revealed that Stonehenge was also a burial site, particularly during its early phases. Cremated remains of at least 58 individuals have been found, some showing signs of illness or injury. This has led some researchers to suggest Stonehenge was a place of healing, a prehistoric hospital where people came seeking cures from the gods or the ancestors. The blue stones in particular were thought to have healing properties, which might explain why they were brought from so far away.
There's also the ritual aspect. Stonehenge sits at the center of a vast, sacred landscape dotted with other monuments, burial mounds, and ceremonial sites. Nearby Durrington Walls, a massive henge and settlement, shows evidence of large gatherings and feasting. People came from all over Britain, bringing livestock and pottery. Stonehenge wasn't isolated. It was part of a network, a pilgrimage destination, a place where the living and the dead came together. What's frustrating is how much we've lost. Stonehenge has been damaged, rearranged, and misunderstood for centuries. The Romans left graffiti on the stones. Medieval people thought it was built by giants or Merlin. In the 20th century, well-meaning but misguided restorations moved stones and poured concrete into gaps. We'll never fully know what the original builders intended, but we can stand in that circle, feel the weight of those stones, and recognize that we're in the presence of something extraordinary. A monument built not for kings or gods, but for understanding, for connection, for meaning. On a wind-swept plateau in southwestern England, not far from Stonehenge, sits another ancient monument that's equally impressive and far less famous: Avebury. It's the largest stone circle in Europe, and unlike Stonehenge, you can walk right up to the stones, touch them, and even wander through the village that's grown up inside the circle. Because, yes, people built a village inside a prehistoric monument, only in Britain. Avebury was constructed around the same time as Stonehenge, roughly 2850 to 2200 BCE, and it's massive. The outer circle is nearly a mile in circumference, surrounded by a deep ditch and an outer bank. Inside are two smaller stone circles, and the whole complex is connected to other sites by ancient avenues of standing stones. At its peak, Avebury would have contained around 600 stones, though only a fraction remain today. Many were broken up and used for building materials in the medieval period, because when you need a wall, why not recycle a 4,000-year-old sacred monument? Like Stonehenge, Avebury's purpose is debated. It was clearly a ceremonial site, a place of gathering and ritual. The scale suggests it wasn't just for a local community, but for a wider region, perhaps even the whole of southern Britain. The ditch alone would have taken thousands of hours to excavate, using antler picks and bone tools. That's not a casual weekend project. That's a society investing heavily in something they believed mattered. One of the most intriguing features of Avebury is the West Kennet Avenue, a double row of standing stones that originally stretched for about a mile and a half, connecting Avebury to a site called the Sanctuary. Walking this avenue would have been a processional experience, a journey through a landscape shaped by human hands and charged with meaning. Some of the stones are tall and thin, others squat and diamond-shaped, possibly representing male and female principles. If that interpretation is correct, then walking the avenue was a symbolic journey through themes of fertility, life, and death. Excavations have turned up fascinating details. Burial sites near Avebury contain remains accompanied by valuable goods, suggesting this was a place of power and prestige. Pottery, tools, and animal bones show evidence of feasting and large gatherings. And like Stonehenge, there are astronomical alignments, though less obvious and harder to pin down. The site seems to have been used continuously for over 1,000 years, with each generation adding, altering, and reinterpreting what came before.
What's remarkable about Avebury is how it's been absorbed into everyday life. You can have a pint in the pub while looking out at stones erected before the pyramids were built.
You can walk your dog past monuments that witnessed the birth of agriculture in Britain. There's something wonderfully unpretentious about it. No fences, no admission fees, just history sitting quietly in a field, waiting for you to notice. Deep in the jungles of Cambodia, swallowed by tree roots and time, lies one of the most spectacular temple complexes ever built, Angkor Wat. It's the largest religious monument in the world, covering over 400 acres, and it was constructed in the early 12th century by the Khmer Empire under King Suryavarman II. Originally a Hindu temple dedicated to Vishnu, it later transformed into a Buddhist site, reflecting the shifting religious landscape of Southeast Asia. And it's an architectural marvel that still leaves engineers scratching their heads. The temple is a miniature replica of the universe in stone. The central tower represents Mount Meru, the home of the gods in Hindu and Buddhist cosmology. The surrounding towers are mountain ranges. The moat is the ocean. Every detail, from the layout to the carvings, follows a cosmic blueprint. Walking through Angkor Wat isn't just sightseeing, it's a journey through a three-dimensional map of the universe as the Khmer people understood it. The construction is staggering. The sandstone blocks, some weighing over a ton, were quarried from a site 25 miles away and transported by river and elephant. No mortar was used. The stones were cut so precisely they fit together without gaps, held by gravity and friction alone. The entire structure is perfectly aligned to cardinal directions, and during the spring equinox, the sun rises directly over the central tower. That's not luck. That's deliberate, sophisticated engineering backed by astronomical knowledge. But Angkor Wat is just the centerpiece. The surrounding area contains hundreds of other temples, reservoirs, and hydraulic systems that supported a city of perhaps 1 million people, making it one of the largest pre-industrial cities in the world. The Khmer Empire didn't just build temples. They engineered an entire landscape, managing water through an elaborate system of canals, reservoirs called barays, and irrigation channels. This allowed them to grow multiple rice crops per year, fueling an empire that dominated Southeast Asia for centuries. So what happened? Why did this mighty civilization collapse? The truth is complex. Climate change played a role. Decades of drought, punctuated by devastating floods, overwhelmed the water management system. The infrastructure that made Angkor great became its vulnerability. Political instability and invasions from neighboring Thai kingdoms weakened the empire. By the 15th century, Angkor was largely abandoned, though it was never entirely forgotten. Buddhist monks continued to maintain Angkor Wat, and local people always knew it was there. The wider world rediscovered Angkor in the 19th century when French explorer Henri Mouhot published accounts and sketches, though it's worth noting that calling it a discovery is a bit rich when locals had been visiting for centuries. Still, Mouhot's work brought international attention, and since then, Angkor has become one of the most studied archaeological sites on the planet. Today, Angkor Wat is Cambodia's most important cultural site, emblazoned on the national flag and visited by millions of tourists each year. Conservation efforts are ongoing, though the site faces threats from tourism, looting, and environmental damage. Tree roots, particularly from the silk cotton and strangler fig trees, have wrapped themselves around temple stones, creating a haunting, beautiful fusion of nature and architecture. Some sections have been left as they were found, trees and stones intertwined, because removing the roots would cause the structures to collapse.
Standing in front of Angkor Wat at sunrise, watching the light creep across the temple's towers and reflect in the moat, you're witnessing something timeless. A monument to human ambition, belief, and the desire to build something that outlasts us. The Khmer Empire is gone, but Angkor remains, silent and magnificent, a reminder that even the mightiest civilizations are temporary, but what they leave behind can be eternal. In the mountains of southern Peru, perched on a narrow ridge between two towering peaks, sits a city that seems to defy logic, Machu Picchu. It's one of the most recognizable archaeological sites in the world, and also one of the most mysterious. Built by the Inca Empire in the 15th century, probably during the reign of Emperor Pachacuti, it was abandoned less than 100 years later and left to the jungle. The Spanish conquistadors never found it. For centuries, it was known only to local farmers. Then, in 1911, American historian Hiram Bingham stumbled upon it with the help of local guides and introduced it to the world. The site is extraordinary. Over 200 structures built from precisely cut granite blocks, fitted together without mortar, arranged in terraces that cascade down the mountainside. There are temples, plazas, residential areas, agricultural terraces, and a sophisticated water management system. The stones were shaped with such precision that you can't fit a knife blade between them. And this was done without iron tools, without the wheel, without draft animals. Just bronze chisels, stone hammers, and an understanding of engineering that still impresses today. But here's the mystery. What was Machu Picchu for? It's too small to be a major city, too remote to be a military fortress, too elaborate to be just a royal retreat. Some researchers think it was a sacred site, a pilgrimage destination aligned to astronomical events. The Intihuatana stone, a carved rock pillar, seems to function as an astronomical clock or calendar marking solstices and equinoxes. Others suggest it was a royal estate, a private retreat for the emperor and his court, a place to escape the politics and pressures of Cusco. Still others think it was an agricultural research station where the Inca experimented with crops at different altitudes using the terraced fields. The truth is, probably all of the above. Machu Picchu wasn't just one thing. It was a multifunctional site that combined religious, agricultural, and residential purposes. The Inca didn't separate the sacred from the practical the way we do. Every stone, every terrace, every alignment had meaning. The mountains surrounding Machu Picchu were considered apus, sacred spirits. The Urubamba River below was part of the Inca's cosmological map. The entire site was a living, breathing expression of their worldview. What's also fascinating is how it was supplied. There are no wheels, no roads suitable for carts. Everything had to be carried up steep mountain paths by human porters or llamas. Food, water, building materials, everything. The agricultural terraces produced some crops, but not enough to sustain the population. That means a constant stream of supplies from the valleys below, a logistical feat that required organization and planning on a massive scale. Then the Spanish arrived. They conquered Cusco in 1532, and within a few decades the Inca Empire was shattered. Machu Picchu was abandoned. Why? We don't know for certain. Some think disease, brought by Europeans, depopulated the site. Others believe the residents simply fled, melting into the jungle to escape Spanish rule. Whatever the reason, the jungle moved in. Trees grew through the buildings. Vines strangled the terraces. For 4 centuries, Machu Picchu slept, hidden and silent.
Today, it's one of the most visited sites in South America, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and one of the new 7 wonders of the world. But that popularity brings problems. The footpaths are eroding. The structures are under stress from millions of visitors. The Peruvian government has implemented limits on daily visitors and restricted access to certain areas, trying to balance tourism with preservation. Because once it's gone, it's gone. And Machu Picchu deserves better than to be loved to death. If you visit, and you should, go early. Watch the sunrise from the terraces and feel the mist roll through the ruins. Stand at the Intihuatana and imagine what the Inca saw when they looked at the stars. Walk the narrow paths and remember that every stone was carried, every terrace dug, every wall built by people who believed they were creating something sacred. They were right. In the heart of Bosnia and Herzegovina, near the town of Visoko, sits a cluster of hills that some claim are actually pyramids. The so-called Bosnian pyramids have sparked fierce debate, with proponents insisting they're ancient man-made structures predating the Egyptian pyramids, while mainstream archaeologists dismiss them as natural geological formations. So what's the truth? Well, it's complicated. The story begins in 2005, when Bosnian-American businessman Semir Osmanagic announced that the Visočica Hill, along with several nearby hills, were actually ancient pyramids covered in soil and vegetation. He called the largest one the Pyramid of the Sun and claimed it was over 12,000 years old, built by an advanced lost civilization. Excavations began, uncovering what Osmanagic described as paved terraces, tunnels, and precisely cut stone blocks. The idea captured the public imagination. Thousands of volunteers flocked to Visoko to help dig. The Bosnian government, seeing potential tourism revenue, threw its support behind the project. Osmanagic published books, gave lectures, and appeared in documentaries, building a global following. But the archaeological establishment was far less enthusiastic. Professional archaeologists who visited the site pointed out that the so-called pyramids looked suspiciously like natural hills. The geometric shapes Osmanagic claimed to see were actually geological formations called flatirons, created by tectonic uplift and erosion. The stone blocks were naturally occurring conglomerate rock, not cut by human hands. The tunnels were old mining shafts from Bosnia's medieval and industrial periods, not ancient passageways. And the claimed age of 12,000 years? Based on questionable radiocarbon dating and misinterpreted data. In 2006, the European Association of Archaeologists issued a formal statement condemning the project, calling it a cruel hoax that was damaging genuine archaeological sites in Bosnia. They accused Osmanagic of ignoring scientific method and promoting pseudo-archaeology. The Bosnian government's support, they argued, was driven by economics, not evidence. But here's where it gets messy. Despite the scientific consensus, the Bosnian Pyramid Project continues. Osmanagic has built a foundation, established a research park, and attracted international attention. Tens of thousands of tourists visit Visoko each year, bringing much-needed revenue to a region still recovering from the 1990s war. For many locals, whether the pyramids are real or not is almost beside the point. They've become a source of pride and economic opportunity. So, are the Bosnian pyramids real? No, not according to geology, archaeology, or any credible scientific analysis. The evidence overwhelmingly points to natural formations misidentified as human-made structures. But the story illustrates something important about how we engage with the past. We want mysteries. We want lost civilizations and ancient wonders. And sometimes we're willing to believe things that fit our desires rather than the evidence. The Bosnian pyramids are a modern myth, shaped by nationalism, economic need, and the enduring human hunger for the extraordinary.
What's remarkable about Avebury is how it's been absorbed into everyday life. You can have a pint in the pub while looking out at stones erected before the pyramids were built. You can walk your dog past monuments that witnessed the birth of agriculture in Britain. There's something wonderfully unpretentious about it. No fences, no admission fees, just history sitting quietly in a field, waiting for you to notice. Deep in the jungles of Cambodia, swallowed by tree roots and time, lies one of the most spectacular temple complexes ever built, Angkor Wat. It's the largest religious monument in the world, covering over 400 acres, and it was constructed in the early 12th century by the Khmer Empire under King Suryavarman II. Originally a Hindu temple dedicated to Vishnu, it later transformed into a Buddhist site, reflecting the shifting religious landscape of Southeast Asia. And it's an architectural marvel that still leaves engineers scratching their heads. The temple is a miniature replica of the universe in stone. The central tower represents Mount Meru, the home of the gods in Hindu and Buddhist cosmology. The surrounding towers are mountain ranges. The moat is the ocean. Every detail, from the layout to the carvings, follows a cosmic blueprint. Walking through Angkor Wat isn't just sightseeing, it's a journey through a three-dimensional map of the universe as the Khmer people understood it. The construction is staggering. The sandstone blocks, some weighing over a ton, were quarried from a site 25 miles away and transported by river and elephant. No mortar was used. The stones were cut so precisely they fit together without gaps, held by gravity and friction alone. The entire structure is perfectly aligned to cardinal directions, and during the spring equinox, the sun rises directly over the central tower. That's not luck. That's deliberate, sophisticated engineering backed by astronomical knowledge. But Angkor Wat is just the centerpiece. The surrounding area contains hundreds of other temples, reservoirs, and hydraulic systems that supported a city of perhaps 1 million people, making it one of the largest pre-industrial cities in the world. The Khmer Empire didn't just build temples. They engineered an entire landscape, managing water through an elaborate system of canals, reservoirs called barays, and irrigation channels. This allowed them to grow multiple rice crops per year, fueling an empire that dominated Southeast Asia for centuries. So what happened?
Why did this mighty civilization collapse? The truth is complex. Climate change played a role. Decades of drought, punctuated by devastating floods, overwhelmed the water management system. The infrastructure that made Angkor great became its vulnerability. Political instability and invasions from neighboring Thai kingdoms weakened the empire. By the 15th century, Angkor was largely abandoned, though it was never entirely forgotten. Buddhist monks continued to maintain Angkor Wat, and local people always knew it was there. The wider world rediscovered Angkor in the 19th century when French explorer Henri Mouhot published accounts and sketches, though it's worth noting that calling it a discovery is a bit rich when locals had been visiting for centuries. Still, Mouhot's work brought international attention, and since then, Angkor has become one of the most studied archaeological sites on the planet. Today, Angkor Wat is Cambodia's most important cultural site, emblazoned on the national flag and visited by millions of tourists each year. Conservation efforts are ongoing, though the site faces threats from tourism, looting, and environmental damage. Tree roots, particularly from the silk cotton and strangler fig trees, have wrapped themselves around temple stones, creating a haunting, beautiful fusion of nature and architecture. Some sections have been left as they were found, trees and stones intertwined, because removing the roots would cause the structures to collapse.
The centerpiece of Tiwanaku is the Akapana Pyramid, a massive stepped structure originally covered in blue stone and standing over 15 meters tall. It was designed as a symbolic mountain, with a sunken courtyard at the top that may have been used for ritual purposes, possibly involving water. Nearby is the Kalasaya Temple, a rectangular enclosure surrounded by massive standing stones. Inside the temple is the Gateway of the Sun, a monolithic doorway carved from a single block of andesite weighing over 10 tons. It's decorated with intricate carvings, including a central figure often identified as the staff god, possibly a creator deity. What's astonishing about Tiwanaku is the stonework. The blocks are cut with incredible precision, fitted together with complex joints that include copper clamps set in T-shaped grooves. Some stones weigh over 100 tons, and how they were moved and positioned remains a subject of debate. The Tiwanaku people had no written language, no wheel, and no draft animals capable of hauling such massive stones. Yet they created structures that have survived earthquakes and centuries of looting. Tiwanaku was also an agricultural powerhouse. The surrounding area contains the remnants of raised field agriculture, a system of elevated planting surfaces separated by water-filled canals. This technique protected crops from frost, improved drainage, and created microclimates that extended the growing season. It was so effective that modern attempts to recreate it have significantly increased crop yields. At its peak, Tiwanaku's agricultural surplus supported not just the city, but a network of colonies and trade partners stretching across the Andes and into the Amazon. So why did it collapse? Around 1000 CE, Tiwanaku was abandoned. Climate change seems to be the culprit. A prolonged drought, known as the Tiwanaku collapse, devastated the raised field system. Crops failed. The population scattered. Political authority fragmented. By the time the Inca rose to power centuries later, Tiwanaku was already a ruin, a ghost city whose builders had become myth. Today, Tiwanaku is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, though it's less visited than Peru's Inca sites, which is a shame. The ruins are evocative and deeply mysterious. Walking among the stones, you can feel the weight of time. The Gateway of the Sun silhouetted against the Andean sky. The massive blocks that seem to defy explanation. The sense that this place once thrummed with life, power, and belief. Tiwanaku might not have the fame of Machu Picchu, but it's every bit as important. A reminder that great civilizations rose and fell in the Americas long before Europeans arrived. In southeastern Turkey, atop a barren hill overlooking the Mesopotamian plains, archaeologists have uncovered what might be the world's oldest temple complex, Göbekli Tepe. It predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. It predates the pyramids by 7,000 years. It was built around 9600 BCE during the Neolithic period by people who were supposed to be simple hunter-gatherers. Except Göbekli Tepe proves they weren't simple at all. The site consists of massive, T-shaped limestone pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in circular enclosures. The pillars are decorated with intricate carvings of animals: lions, foxes, scorpions, snakes, vultures, and more. The craftsmanship is stunning, detailed, and sophisticated. And here's the kicker. The people who built Göbekli Tepe hadn't invented agriculture yet. They had no pottery, no metal tools, no permanent settlements. They were nomadic hunter-gatherers who somehow organized, quarried, transported, and erected these monuments.
This discovery has upended everything we thought we knew about the development of civilization. The traditional narrative goes like this. Humans settled down, invented agriculture, formed villages, developed social hierarchies, and then built monumental architecture. Göbekli Tepe reverses that order. It suggests that the desire to build, to gather, to create sacred spaces actually came first, and that agriculture developed later to support those gatherings. Religion, in other words, might have kick-started civilization. Think about what that means. Groups of hunter-gatherers, perhaps numbering in the hundreds, came together repeatedly over generations to build Göbekli Tepe. They carved pillars, hauled stones, and performed rituals. This required planning, coordination, and a shared belief system. And it required food. Lots of it. Feeding hundreds of people during construction would have strained wild resources, possibly driving them to experiment with cultivating plants and domesticating animals. Göbekli Tepe might be where the agricultural revolution began. But what were they worshipping? We don't know. The carvings suggest a complex cosmology involving animals, possibly as totems or spirits. Some pillars have human-like arms and hands, suggesting they represent gods or ancestors. The circular arrangement might symbolize gatherings or celestial patterns. But without writing, we're left guessing. What's also strange is that Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried. Around 8000 BCE, the builders filled in the enclosures with dirt and rubble, covering the pillars and abandoning the site. Why? Was it a ritual closing, a way to retire the sacred space? Or did something change? Some shift in belief or circumstance that made the site obsolete? We don't know. But the act of burial preserved Göbekli Tepe beautifully, keeping it hidden until German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began excavations in 1995. Only a fraction of the site has been uncovered so far. Ground-penetrating radar suggests there are at least 20 more enclosures waiting beneath the soil, each potentially as impressive as those already excavated. Göbekli Tepe could take decades, maybe centuries, to fully explore. And every new discovery rewrites our understanding of early human society. So there you have it, some of the world's most mysterious historical places. We've barely scratched the surface. There are countless other sites, each with their own secrets, their own unanswered questions. The truth is, the past is far stranger and more complex than we often give it credit for. These places remind us that ancient people were every bit as clever, ambitious, and creative as we are. They just expressed it differently. And maybe, just maybe,